Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to our October 8th meeting. If you would give us the roll call, please, Ms. McGuire.
Councilmember Engler,
Here.
Councilmember McNamee,
Here.
Councilmember Taylor,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Newman,
Here.
and Mayor Adam.
And I'm here. And we do have a closed session. If you'd announce that, Ms. Newman.
Thank you, Mayor Adam. First of all, I'll be actually pulling item 3C from the agenda. We will not be hearing it tonight. I'll be continuing that matter. So we'll be going into closed session on two matters, both of them pending litigation pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9A. First one is California Department of Housing and Community Development versus Shangri-La, and the second one is F. Roberts Construction versus Shangri-La.
All right, thank you very much. And we will rejoin you at 6 o'clock. Well, let's get started. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the October 8th session of the Thousand Oaks City Council. And do you have anything to report for our closed session, Ms. Noonan?
Nothing to report.
Nothing to report. If you'd all stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. Well, we've got a very special presentation this evening. Hello, everybody. Good to see you. So glad you chose Thousand Oaks and Los Robles Hospital to complete your residency. I understand you come from all around the country, and some of you are coming home to Thousand Oaks to complete your residency, so that's very exciting. We hope that you do well, and we hope that you maybe even stay here in Thousand Oaks, which would be great. We'd be happy to have you. I understand there's 54 individuals in the class, which is amazing. And let's see, we have CEO of Los Robles Health System, Phil Butel, is here to speak with us, as well as Chief Medical Officer of Los Robles Health System, Dr. Gabriella Sherman. If you both would come up, please. Phil, thank you for being here. Gabriella, would you like to take the mic?
Yeah, thank you very much. This is my first time at City Council, and it's nice to see when Los Robles shows up, we show up in force. I've heard rumors of that in the past. But I want to thank you all for how welcoming you've been to me personally and our health system as we've embarked on this journey with graduate medical education. You know, I've only been here a short time, but it's actually very easy to see the impact that these residents have on our medical community and our community as a whole. So I couldn't be more proud of you, and I'm excited to see what you all do with your careers. I'm going to hand it over to Gabriella to talk a little bit more, but thank you all, and thank you, City, for what you do for us.
Okay. Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much to the City Council for having us here. It really is a tremendous accomplishment to welcome Los Robles' newest class of fellows and residents, 54, as you said, to be exact. And we've come a long way in just 3 short years. I was here back in 2021 when we started our very first graduate medical education program in internal medicine with 20 resident physicians. And fast forward to today, we have a thriving program of 117 fellows and residents, which includes a cardiology fellowship program and several other residencies, internal medicine, emergency medicine, neurology, anesthesiology, general surgery, and transitional year. And we couldn't do that without many of the talented physicians that we have on staff at Los Robles. I'd like to call a few of our colleagues that we have here, Dr. Susky, our Chief of Staff, Dr. Tacker, our Program Director for Internal Medicine, Dr. Habis, who's our Designated Institutional Officer, and hopefully I didn't miss anybody else who's in the crowd, and of course all of our talented young physicians up in the audience. Our GME program provides an opportunity for these physicians here to receive an unparalleled training experience at Los Robles, complemented by the many talented physicians we have on staff here. And studies show that 70% of physicians settle down in the community in which they complete their training, and that really is great news for us here in Thousand Oaks. Community hospitals are ideal hosts for primary care training as well, providing experiences with a diverse panel of patients. And we all know about the national and very local shortage of primary care right here in our community. And most exciting to me, the residents and our faculty bring with them the newest practices and approaches to care, translating to better care for our patients and our entire community. And I'm truly excited to see the bright futures that these incredible physicians have ahead of them and the many great things that they will accomplish for our patients and, of course, for the greater Thousand Oaks community. So thank you again for having us here. It's really an honor.
Thank you, Gabriella and Phil. I just have to say that you've picked an incredible institution to be affiliated with. Los Robles Hospital is a very important part of our community, and we're happy that you're going to be a very important part of our community as well. You know, we always talk about public safety in Thousand Oaks. Health is just as important, and I know you're going to keep us healthy. So why don't we all go up and get a picture? I think we can squeeze you all into the camera. Let's come on up.
We'll get everybody in. So we're going to need 3 lines. Everybody has to be in.
Listen to Carl, he knows what he's doing. How's it look, Carl? Let's hear it for the residents.
Sure.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Dr. Sherman, go right ahead.
Okay. On October 26th, in partnership with the Ventura County Sheriff's Department, we will be hosting our annual Crush the Crisis Day. It's a national prescription take-back day on the Los Robles campus. And so we are encouraging the community to come out and to dispose of any of their medications that are not being used, so we can get them out of the hands of people who maybe don't need them. And as you know, with our giant opioid crisis, it is essential that we control all controlled substances very closely. So this is a great opportunity to go through your prescription drug closets and empty them out of medications that you don't need. We will have flyers, and there will be posting to social media as well, and we hope to see many of our community members. Thank you.
Thank you. Sounds like a great event. Mr. McNamee.
Question for Los Robles as a service to the community. Do you have a used needle program that people can drop off?
That is a great question. I am not sure. In the outpatient lab? Okay. Thank you. So in the outpatient labs, we do have sharps containers where we can safely dispose of used needles.
Can people bring in their sharps containers
They
they have
can.
at home and just drop them off?
They can.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question.
Thank you.
Okay.
Great to see 54 individuals dedicated to a healthy Thousand Oaks. All righty, let's move on to public comments. If you'd announce those, Ms. McGuire.
This is the time and place for public comments. Speakers are requested to state their name and community of residence for the record. 6 individuals have requested to speak, and pursuant to council standards, speakers are allowed 3 minutes. The yellow light displays when you have 1 minute remaining.
All right, thank you. Let's start with Bob Hammett, followed by John.
Hoping the doctors would stay just in case I fell down these stairs. All right.
We could get you a white coat, Bob, but
All right, I have a handout before you start my timer, if you don't mind.
I'm just going to keep one. Okay. Okay, so I'm speaking tonight about the food trucks on Avenida de los Arboles. I got a flyer that came to my house that was asking me to come down and speak to it. Previously, I'd gone in and made an actual complaint, and I got a list of all the rules in regards to the food trucks. So I really just wanted to understand the rules, and I got a clear understanding of that. And then basically, I looked at the food truck that was closest to my house that I was most concerned with. So there's one that's been on Arboles across from the...
Bob, pull that mic around. There you go.
Better? Sorry. There's one food truck that's down by the Dollar Tree store on Arboles. It's been there for about a year, and no one's really done anything about it, so it's kind of frustrating. But I've kind of let that one go for a while. They made a new one across from where Three Amigos is and Rite Aid. So if you look at the handout I've given you, you can see there's several violations that I've highlighted that this food truck is not following the rules to. One is that they're within 100 feet of the intersection. So the line, the A line there, that is with a 100-foot mark. I measured it with a tape. So that's where the 100-foot mark is. The B and the C are the actual trailer, and then the truck that pulls it. So it's like a dually truck that pulls it. Around the corner from there, you see the D and E. They were parked there earlier, and then they moved to this place that's a little bit better spot for them. So they're within 100 feet. They're occupying more than 30 feet of space, because between the truck and the trailer, they're well over 30 feet. They are possibly violating the traffic laws, because I don't know about the high-flow traffic rules in that particular spot. That one have to be looked into. They are operating a generator on this truck the whole time they're there. And the rule is they're supposed to not be there more than 4 hours. They're there from 11:15 every day until about 9 p.m. If you flip the page, you'll see some pictures. The top two pictures are showing customers of theirs sitting on the person's property where the truck is located. The next picture down is a picture of at night. If you're driving down Avenida de los Arboles towards Moore Park Road, they have a spotlight, and they also have a rotating sign that says, tacos and burritos and things like that. But the lights are glaring out onto that property. The house on the particular corner actually has a resident is handicapped, in a wheelchair, has 24-hour care with nurses. I went and talked to them. They're like, that generator's running the whole time. It's already a noisy street. Arboles, we know it's a noisy street. But that generator is just nonstop. It's kind of like just having a construction zone in your backyard. The next picture on the left is the view from Arcturus Street looking down Avenida de los Arboles. Your view is blocked. Oh, no. The last two pictures, if I have just a moment, the last two pictures are the van that's in front of the truck that's in front of Manny's and where the Dollar Tree is. That van is actually a supply truck for the taco truck that's there.
All right,
well
Bob.
over 30 feet. So,
Appreciate you coming down. Thank
yeah,
you.
You're welcome.
All right, let us go now to John, followed by Patricia Jones. Evening.
Hello, everybody. How's everybody doing? Just give me a thumbs up. Come on. All right. You know how I love the Constitution of the United States of America? I'm here to talk about that some more. How serious do we take it? I know we took oaths to uphold it, protect it, defend it, but how serious do we really, really consider the Constitution? Last month was the birthday of the U.S. Constitution, and we should celebrate that because it's one of the best, I think it's the best document in the world as far as giving us processes to run a country. There's a few things going on in various places, various states and cities where we are actually violating the Constitution. And what I'm praying for is that we all get to understand it a little bit better, each month or each day or each week, and just inquire on all the laws that we pass, or the ones that the Assembly of California and the Senate of California, the ones they push downward for us to adopt, I'm hoping that we can all just consider, is this constitutional or is it unconstitutional? And it takes a bit of time to do, but I think it's worth it, because as we chip away a little bit at the Constitution, with each bill that is chipping away at the Constitution, it just gets worse. And it sets a precedence. And sometimes we don't know it. Sometimes we don't really realize that it actually is an unconstitutional issue. But I'm hoping that as we go forward, that we really consider things, what we're doing, and just see if they are constitutional or not. I can help with that if you want. Give me a call. I was reading, we're in election season, and I got this thing, and it says, let's pray for swift justice for any unlawful or corrupt action that is taken to thwart our nation's constitution, laws, or integrity. And then it refers to a proverb that says, it is a joy for the just to do justice, but destruction will come to the workers of iniquity. So, God bless you guys.
Thank you, John. Patricia Jones, followed by Josh Gray.
Good evening, honorable council members and city staff. Great to see you. I'm here as a proud resident of Thousand Oaks for 42 years, incredible, and also wearing my New West Symphony hat. This weekend, the New West Symphony had their opening concert for the season, and we congratulated the city of Thousand Oaks on their 60th anniversary, and I have a picture I wanted to show. Is that ready? Show you from this last weekend. We thanked and congratulated the city of Thousand Oaks on their 60th anniversary. We also were there with members of the other resident companies, Kim Maselli from Pacific Festival Ballet, and Cindy Murray from Five Star Theatrical. We all worked together to create this amazing concert. So we had fun. We have the mayor, Al Adam, there in the middle. Hope you enjoyed that. But we wanted to congratulate the city and the city founders for their vision in creating this vibrant community that we all enjoy. Partnerships are at the heart of what we do, and we are honored to pay tribute to the city of Thousand Oaks and our talented resident groups. So I also wanted to thank Mayor Al Adam and Bob Engler for their support of our Adopted Musician program. Over the past year, Bob and Al got a chance to sit on stage with the orchestra, together with some of our other supporters. It's a perk that we offer our patrons who adopt a musician each year, and it's quite a different experience. This is our conductor's idea to allow you to really immerse yourself in the experience. So it gives you a firsthand look at the magic of the symphonic experience. It was, really, really special also this weekend because I don't know if you're aware, but the Beatles came to America 60 years ago. So we celebrated that as well this weekend by having, we had one of our singers from the Five Star help us, and everybody joined hands, and we sang "Let It Be" and "I Want to Hold Your Hand," so that we, celebrated the city, celebrated the Beatles, celebrated the magic of the symphony and our three resident companies. It was truly a weekend filled with joy and gratitude, and we deeply value our place in this wonderful city at the Bank of America Performing Arts Center. And we invite all of you to the next concert November 2nd. where we will feature special tribute and dedication to America. We're going to be showing dramatic aerial, oh, am I out of time? Okay.
Whoops.
How'd that happen? I was looking at it. But the next concert's going to be just as fabulous. And I have brochures for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Patricia. That was a lot of fun, by the way. Really enjoyed the evening. I'm sure Bob did as well. Bob, you were great in the ballet section. Really, really amazing talent. I had no idea. Okay. Josh Gray.
Hey, Mayor Adam, council members, thanks for having me this evening. Just a few updates from the Greater Conejo Valley Chamber of Commerce, and I did want to say I was there Saturday. That was a wonderful symphony, and thank you for putting that on. And it's wonderful to see you. I just want to give an update. Next Friday, we're looking forward to our Spotlight Breakfast series focused on education in the Conejo Valley at the Sheraton. The panel will include Dr. Nunez, president of CLU, Dr. Yao, president of Channel Islands, Dr. Sukanu, president of Moore Park College, Dr. Brewster, who is provost of Pepperdine, Dr. Stefanowski, the superintendent of Las Virgenes Unified, and Dr. McLaughlin, superintendent of Conejo Valley Unified. That'll be next Friday. You can find tickets on our website. On the 24th of this month, the Chamber is having its 13th annual Taste of Conejo at the Hyatt Regency. More than 50 of the Conejo Valley's most exciting and innovative food and beverage establishments will be there with live entertainment, custom wine glass engraving, and interactive displays throughout the evening. And then Leadership Conejo's 22nd class started last month with in the morning with the City of Agora Hills and the afternoon session at Proactive Sports Performance. This Friday's session will be at CLU in the morning, followed by the Ronald Reagan Library in the afternoon. And then on tourism, since I last updated you, Visit Conejo Valley has selected new logos and branding that continue to be rolled out. You can see them on social media, and if you're curious about anything else, feel free to let me know. I'd like to extend a thanks to Dusty Russell for providing input on what logos and branding could be the best fit for the community of Thousand Oaks. I'm also pleased to share that Visit Conejo Valley now has its own Director of Business Development and Strategic Partnerships, who just finished her first week on the job as of today. RevPAR numbers for the TID and the region as a whole over the summer were unfortunately lower than anticipated. However, September has seen us return to normal expectations, and our marketing spend for next summer is being adjusted to compensate for what occurred this summer. In the last 2 months, Visit Conejo Valley has attended Connect RTO Marketplace in Milwaukee and Teams Conference in Anaheim, promoting Conejo Valley as a destination for corporate retreats and traveling sports leagues. We've continued a streak of significant wins in public relations recently, with the Conejo Valley being highlighted in Newsweek, CBS News, Bold Journey that interviewed the founders of 507, Medium Magazine, and IdeaMensch. Additionally, in September, Visit Conejo Valley was featured on KTLA's LA Unscripted with a focus on health and wellness in the area, and restaurant highlights for Moody Rooster and Joy Cafe. Recent influencers in the area included Vitor, who took some amazing photos in the region. And then I just want to shout out, we'll have our Board of Directors meeting on October 15th and our annual retreat on November 12th. If you have any input, feedback, anything you'd like to contribute, if you'd like to attend, you're always more than welcome.
All right, thank you,
Thanks for being a
Josh.
partner.
And we have Clint Foltz with us. Clint?
Hello, my name is Clint Foltz. I'm a resident of Thousand Oaks, and I'm a member of the Conejo Climate Coalition and Ventura County, yes, in my backyard. As Hurricane Milton is bearing down on Florida, I'd like to talk about the climate, housing, and homelessness crises. In the wake of Hurricane Helene, thousands have been left homeless. Scientists estimate that climate change increased Hurricane Helene's rainfall by up to 50% and made that event up to 20 times more likely. As the climate crisis intensifies, housing stability will be increasingly under threat. Large-scale disasters will increase displacement and reduce our housing stock. Here in California, we live under the threat of dangerous wildfires, but we're also vulnerable to flooding. According to NASA, current climate models indicate that rising temperatures will intensify the Earth's water cycle, increasing evaporation. Increased evaporation will result in more frequent and intense storms, and with those storms, more flooding. Scientists have identified an arc storm scenario, a proposed event based on repeated historical megastorms that could devastate parts of California, causing more than $725 billion in losses, mostly due to flooding, and could affect a quarter of California's homes. Imagine if that happens here. If your home is destroyed and you are now one of those people, you're homeless. You'll have to wait for insurance money to rebuild your home, if that's even possible. Has your policy been canceled? Maybe FEMA can help, or has the money already run out? So where do you live? Perhaps rent an apartment in an attempt to stay in the area? Could you afford to rent a market rate apartment? For how long? Would an apartment even be available? Ventura County has the largest housing shortage in the nation. Let's be clear, homelessness is a housing problem. Researchers have shown how absolute rent levels and rental vacancy rates are associated with regional rates of homelessness. Many other common explanations, drug use, mental illness, poverty, or local political context, fail to account for regional variation. Visit homelessnesshousingproblem.com for more information. To the council, I'd say please prioritize more housing and climate policies. And to our community, I'd say please vote for candidates that are serious about science and the climate crisis. Whether it's about making it easier to build ADUs, building more multifamily units, or making our city more climate resilient, the answer is yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Clint. Dan Tweed.
Yes, my name's Daniel Tweed. Here I'm in Thousand Oaks, and I'd like to thank the mayor and the council members and everyone who's tuned in. And I guess what I'd like to comment on in the 3-minute period for public comments is we really need to have more civic engagement. And I noticed that with the new website that it was pretty hard to find the place to register to be part of this public comment period. So that's one thing that could be done to help with civic engagement. Also wanted to speak on a little bit about a very important hobby, not just a hobby, but part of public safety infrastructure. That's amateur radio. And with this huge weather disasters happening, we really did not have enough people doing the kind of health and safety welfare checks and communications relays. So we really need to replace that infrastructure as the older amateur radio operators age out. And I also wanted to note that the party that I'm the vice presidential candidate for, the U.S. Transhumanist Party, just turned 10 years old, and we had a very good celebration on October 6th. We had Zoltan Istvan, the founder of the party. He was the first presidential candidate. We had Charlie Cam, Liz Parrish. They were the next people that were in the national president, vice president slot. And then this year it's myself and Tom Ross. And it is legal to take a ballot selfie in California. So if you want to write in Tom Ross president and Dan Tweed vice president on your ballot, I think you're not going to help spoil the election for someone you don't want. California's pretty solidly spoken for, but and then congratulations to the doctors, the new crop of doctors. And you know, the Transhumanist Party is about putting science and health at the forefront of policy and politics. And it would really help if we had right to try legislation, which is hard to do with the current FDA policies. I think there was a bill in Montana that was pretty progressive on that. But really, it's also about declaring aging a disease. I mean, some people talk about dignified diseases of aging and then the undignified diseases like Alzheimer's. And really, we should just shoot for indefinite longevity as a medical goal. We should really have like a moonshot project for that. So until we can do that, there's cryonics as an option. And I guess I'm out of time.
Thank you, Dan. Appreciate you coming down. All right, Mr. Bowers, any follow-up?
Just a quick note on the food truck situation, something that we're actively aware of. There is an open and active code compliance case on this that we've been managing for quite some time. Violations have been issued. As the speaker mentioned, there are areas that are not in compliance. And so, as the council knows, working with code compliance, the end goal is to achieve compliance, which we will achieve in this case. In fact, we'll be meeting with food truck operators again on Thursday, along with some folks from County Environmental Health. So I'm confident we'll gain compliance. It is an active situation and something that our team is working on to get resolved.
Thank you, Mr. Powers. Good to know. On to the consent calendar. Anything to pull? Looking for a motion.
So
Mr. Taylor.
I'll move consent. Where are we? 9A through, sorry, my vote just came up. Somebody give me the last letter.
Yeah, 9A through
G.
G.
I'll move 9A through G.
There you go. All right, motion on the floor. Vote, please.
And that motion passes 5-0.
Thank you. All right, let's turn to our public hearing this evening. That will be presented by our Associate Planner, Angela Georgieff. We're going to talk a little bit about the housing element implementation and the ADU regulations.
I'll open the hearing for us. So hearing advertised as required
And we're
by
going to
law
announce the hearing. Thank you.
is open to consider agenda item number 10A, housing element implementation, accessory dwelling unit regulations, MCA 2023-70005. Speakers are requested to state their name and community of residence, and pursuant to the Levine Act, speakers are required to disclose on the record, if they have not already disclosed, the following information on their speaker card. If they are an agent or a party to the proceeding, have made a contribution of more than $250 to any council member in the preceding 12 months, the amount of the contribution and who made the contribution and to which council member. Participants to the proceeding who have done the same are encouraged to make the same disclosure for the record. 2 people have presented speaker cards, and pursuant to city council standards, speakers are allowed 5 minutes. The yellow light displays when you have 1 minute remaining.
Thank you, Ms. McGuire. It's all yours, Ms. Georgieff. Please proceed.
Good evening, Mayor Adams and council members. The item before you is for a municipal code amendment, MCA-2023-70005, to update the accessory dwelling unit ordinance, more commonly referred to as the ADU ordinance. The request before you is to amend Title IX, Chapter 4 of the Thousand Oaks Municipal Code by repealing Section 9.4.2521 regarding accessory dwelling units and junior accessory dwelling units, and replacing it with a new Article 45 to comply with the new state law, as well as to carry out program implementation from the city's 2021 to 2029 housing element. Article 45 of Title IX, Chapter 4, creates new regulations dedicated to ADUs and JADUs and includes updates to the development standards and entitlement process for ADUs and JADUs. As you can see from the timeline on the slide, it's been over 4 years since the city's ADU ordinance has been updated. State laws have been updated since then, and our current ordinance is inconsistent with state law. In December 2023, the City Council adopted a comprehensive update to the city's general plan. The city also adopted the revised 6th cycle housing element, which is one of the mandated elements of the general plan. One of those important components is updating our ADU ordinance to be consistent with state law as part of Housing Element Program 3. Our city's housing element identifies ADUs as an integral housing type to meet housing needs. The proposed amendment before you this evening will ensure that development standards are consistent with state law requirements. Applicants can propose ADUs through garage conversions, conversion of a portion of an existing residence, by attaching a new ADU to an existing residence, or by constructing a new detached ADU. A combination of both a JADU and an ADU can also be proposed. There are 6 prominent changes proposed to the city's ADU ordinance. The first one is junior accessory dwelling units that share a bathroom with a primary dwelling must have an internal connection. Another revision is involving front yard setbacks. State law updates still remain silent on front setbacks. There are now new changes regarding front setbacks, and the city's ordinance is not changing with regard to front yard setbacks. However, new state law does include a code section which requires that an 800 square foot ADU cannot be prevented due to lot coverage, floor area ratio, open space, or front setbacks. The city's current ordinance allows for attached ADUs and JADUs to be up to the same height as the primary dwelling and up to 16 feet high for a detached ADU. State law now allows for attached ADUs to be permitted up to 25 feet in height or as high as the primary residence, whichever is lower. Detached ADUs shall be permitted up to 16 feet in height and can go up to 18 feet high if they're located within half mile of a transit stop. As well, they can get an additional 2 feet of height if the proposed detached ADU has a pitched roof. These new height allowances are included with the proposed ordinance. State law has also clarified that proposed single-family dwelling applications that include ADUs are to be reviewed the same for parking exemptions as existing dwellings with proposed ADUs. State law has also clarified that non-habitable space, such as garages, can be converted into an ADU or a JADU. Previously, ADUs were limited to 800 square feet for attached and converted ADUs, but that limit has now been increased to 850 square feet. Staff's recommendation to Planning Commission was to change the language to the maximum size for 850 square feet or 50% of the existing primary dwelling total floor area, whichever is greater. On September 9th, staff presented the revised ADU ordinance to Planning Commission. At that hearing, the recommendation for approval included the additional language for the maximum attached or converted ADU to include 1,000 square feet for units that are 2 bedrooms or more. That change was included with the ordinance that's presented this evening. Staff still feels confident about our original recommendation without the inclusion of the allowance of 1,000 square feet for attached ADUs with 2 bedrooms or more. The most significant change in the state law updates is that there is a clear distinction between an ADU and/or a JADU application that follows a streamlined process and one that is reviewed according to the jurisdiction's ordinance, as shown in the table on this slide. With the streamlined state process, specific limitations on square footage and height, ensuring that applications meet the streamlined criteria. It offers a faster, less restrictive approval path for homeowners who meet the criteria, and staff has no discretion in reviewing applications under this process. With the city's application process, if homeowners opt for this path, their projects must adhere to objective design standards and development standards, which we will be going over in a little bit more detail in this presentation. In return for meeting these stricter guidelines, homeowners are granted more flexibility in certain aspects of their projects, including additional square footage and height. Staff has more discretion with this process to ensure that new ADUs and JADUs have a positive contribution to the architectural character of our neighborhoods. One of the biggest opportunities the update to ADU state law is the allowance for cities to adopt their own objective design standards. This is important because every community is not the same, and having these objective design standards will help with the selection of better design from both homeowners and developers in the city. With ADUs being processed ministerially, there are no public hearings or design reviews as part of the project review. However, this does not mean that neighbors do not have concerns about ADUs. The most common concern that we hear from constituents is concerns about privacy and neighborhood compatibility. Continuing with the theme of privacy concerns, the proposed objective standards for second-story ADUs include exterior stairs to not be permitted with ADUs or JADUs on second floor. This objective design standard is intended to both protect privacy and to encourage better design. This slide shows a primary residence that has added a second floor ADU with an internal staircase. Also, the architectural design incorporates a second story which is set back from the first floor plane. Garage conversions are a common request to create both ADUs and JADUs. Often project submittals include maintaining the garage door on the outside of the primary with a conversion. However, there are significant safety concerns with this design approach because a garage door is symbolic to vehicle or storage space. Therefore, an objective standard to remove the garage door is included with the ordinance. With individuals and families living in this converted space, the intent of the standard is for the space to visually reflect living space for emergency responders such as fire, police, and medical. The example on this slide is a recent submittal to the city of Thousand Oaks, and you can see here that the architect has incorporated the same materials, added windows, and a planter on the front of the converted space. This is reflective of the objective standards that are included with this proposed amendment for the removal of the garage door, installation of doors and windows, and landscaping directly in front of the converted area. Updating the ADU ordinance is necessary to implement Program 3 of the housing element and maintain certification of the city's housing element. Additionally, the general plan includes goals and policies that support the promotion of ADUs in the city. Specifically, Goal LU3 advocates for diverse housing types and housing for different life stages and incomes. The construction of ADUs supports the availability of affordable housing for all age groups and low and middle income families. Therefore, the adoption of the updated ADU ordinance is consistent with the general plan. These amendments are critical to demonstrate the city is fulfilling its obligation and ensure consistency between the general plan, specific plans, and policies and regulations. The proposed updates to the ADU ordinance address inconsistencies between the city's local ADU, JADU development standards and the amended state ADU, JADU laws. Moreover, updating the ADU ordinance is essential for maintaining the city's housing element certification with HCD. The proposed ordinance update will support responsible development of new housing units, creating additional housing opportunities and diverse building types. This will help the city meet its regional housing needs allocation while establishing development standards that preserve and protect the character of our existing residential neighborhoods and maintain as much local control as permitted under the law. Therefore, staff recommends that City Council find that the update to the city's ADU regulations is exempt from the requirements of CEQA pursuant to Section 15282H, other statutory exemptions, and Public Resource Code Section 21080.17, and read in title only, further reading be waived, and introduce the ordinance approving MCA 2023-70005, amending Chapter 4 of Title 9 of the Thousand Oaks Municipal Code to comply with state law and implement the city's 2021 to 2029 housing element. Developing this revised ordinance was a true collaboration effort with staff, and we are here to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Georgieff. Questions for staff? Mr. Taylor.
All right, thank you for that presentation. I have 3 questions. My first one, I saw there was a staff recommendation for the maximum square footage, and it was different than what the Planning Commission is recommending. Can you explain why you guys landed at 850 on the square footage cap as opposed to 1,000?
Sure, I can address that question. So this was kind of a tricky section because as staff, we're trying to balance two state law provisions. One, which requires a minimum size for a unit, but also there's a state law provision that prohibits an attached ADU from exceeding 50% of the square footage of the primary dwelling unit. Right, so we're trying to kind of merge those two together, and we came up with a language that addressed the minimum, right, and then provided for changes to that up to the 50% of the existing dwelling unit, right? And we thought that complied with state law and provided for the majority of the situations out there. The Planning Commission requested that we include language in there, and I understand the concept because it tracks state law. But in my opinion, the inclusion of that language actually creates more confusion. I think the way that it was initially drafted provides the clearest municipal code section for the public and staff.
Okay, so just so I got that right, you guys recommended a max amount of 850 square feet, but there's also a state provision or a component where you can also build up to 50% of the total square footage of the home. So what you're saying is if you have a home that the square footage is, let's say, 1,600 feet, right? Well, 50% of that would be less than 1,000 square footage ADU. But seeing that you can go up to 1,000, you're saying it's confusing because which one is it? Is it 1,000 or is it what would that be, 800? Does that make sense? And did I get that right? You're like, no, this is a mess. Okay, great.
So one clarification. State law precludes ADUs that exceed, attached ADUs that exceed the 50% of the primary dwelling unit, right? So that's the one change I would make. And what I would say is that because there's these conflicting limits, right, you can come up with, some project, some hypothetical project that has, the size of the primary residence and the size of a proposed ADU, right? And there can be some inconsistencies. And so what we're saying is that the way that we drafted, we think is the clearest way to convey the blending of those two state requirements.
Okay, I got that. Thank you. Second question, you mentioned affordable housing. I just want to make sure I'm clear on this. You mentioned affordable housing, I think, because if you're looking at, let's say, rent from a price per square foot, and you're building smaller units, it's more affordable than the comparison, but this isn't affordable housing, correct? An affordable option, but not considered affordable housing? Am I hearing that right?
Thank you, Councilmember Taylor. Yes, that's correct.
Okay. All right. That's all. Thank you.
Mr. Newman.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for your presentation. I appreciate all the work staff did. We must comply with state law. State law is a fast-moving target, and it's a complex area, and I appreciate your walking us through some of those complexities, not all of which I'm sure I fully understand. So I want to ask for clarifications on a couple of points, following up on my colleague, Councilmember Taylor's questions about this 850 and 50% area. A couple of questions around minimums and maximums that would be permitted with these changes. So hypothetically, if a homeowner has, let's say, a primary residence that is 1,200 square feet and wants to do an attached ADU, would they be allowed to do up to 50%? That's 600 square feet. They would be allowed to do that, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Or they would also be allowed to go up to 850 square feet. Is that correct? Or is it the lesser or the greater of the two, is my question.
Yeah, that's a That's an interesting question, right? And I think you're hitting on one of those potential situations where you can't comply with both state laws, right? And so there are going to be those situations out there, but we got to take those on a case-by-case basis, and we'll have to address those if we receive an application that presents one of those things. And again, the way we drafted it, we thought that it was the clearest and most inclusive way to address that situation.
But in theory, there could be an application, again, for a 1,200 square foot residence that had an 850 foot attached ADU, correct? If we look at the state law one way, I'm not talking about our law, I'm talking about state law. If we look at the state law in one way, that is a permitted use, would it not be?
So let me elaborate a little bit. Theoretically, if we're having a theoretical, professorial conversation, absolutely. But let's talk practical here. And that's when staff developed the language, they were looking for practicality because there is confusion in the state laws that was passed. So for any person who wants to build an ADU on their property, we try to ensure that the language in our municipal codes are understandable to anyone who just opens a book and reads them. So we start from a practical as opposed to a theoretical standpoint. The vast majority, I would probably say 99% of any ADU application that we get in the city is never going to have this issue. They're just not, because anyone, the sizes of most of the houses in Thousand Oaks are significantly larger than 1,200 square feet. Let's just be clear here. So we're trying to find a practical way to educate someone on what they can and cannot do. I would say that if I have my house at home, I have an 1,800 square foot house. I could not build an attached ADU that is 1,000 square feet under state law. And I think everybody here is clear on that. The problem with the verbiage that was added at the Planning Commission implies to an unsuspecting or an unknowledgeable resident that they can. We actually believe that if we don't include that language and the way that the rule is written to provide the minimums, that it actually allows staff to deal with an outlier on a case-by-case basis to ensure compliance with state law, which at the end of the day, we have to do that, but not confuse a resident who might have already hired an architect and designed a 1,000 square foot ADU and then coming to the counter and finding out they can't do it. So that's really the reason why we're recommending not to include the language, if that makes sense. I know that sounds like a lot, but that's really what we're trying to accomplish here.
It does, and I would agree that I'm not aware of any case where there is a 1,200 square foot house building that large an ADU.
Yeah.
On the other hand, I want to make sure we're being very clear in our laws, and I want to understand what law we're voting on here.
What we're trying to prevent is the unknowing homeowner spending a lot of money on architectural plans that we're going to turn
For
away
something
from.
they can't do.
For something that they can't do.
Right.
With
No, I
that
appreciate
language in
that.
there, we're concerned that it's going to result in confusion.
Right. So I hope my question on the other end of the spectrum will be much simpler, which is the maximum. Homeowner with let's say a 4,000 square foot home now wants to do another attached ADU. This one's 2,000 square feet. That would be permitted, correct? Because that's 50%. Would that be a permitted use?
Thanks, Councilmember Newman. Yeah, the way that the code reads is that the maximum is 850 square feet or 50% of the dwelling, whichever is greater.
Okay. So if they come in with 2,001 square feet, that's a no-no, but 2,000, that's okay.
Yes.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Moving on to the objective design standards, I'm very glad to see this element because this is what we do. We are in the local control business, and this is where we are exercising local control. So do I understand by your statements about materials and colors that if, for example, there's a homeowner who had, let's say, a split-family ranch home with wood siding, and they come in with an application for a detached ADU that is a concrete and glass structure in a completely different color than the primary residence, that because of the objective design standard guidelines, that would not be a permitted use because they are very different architecturally?
Councilmember Newman, that is a great question, and that's exactly why we designed the objective design standards. But as I explained earlier, it depends on what pathway is chosen. And that's why we did include the allowance for a little bit more square footage for the detached ADUs if they follow the city's ADU ordinance path. Therefore, we would have discretion over the design. But if they went with the standard 800 square foot and with the streamline approach, then
Thank you for anticipating my next question, which I think you've answered it, but you did, in your presentation, you described two pathways. One is you called the city process and one you called a state streamline process. And I think what you're saying is two things. One is the objective design standard part of this only applies to the city process, number one. Is that correct?
yes, that's correct.
And number two, we the city want to give incentives for property owners to follow that pathway so that we can exercise local control in this way.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And then the final question I have is a letter from a resident that came in very late, just 20 minutes before tonight's hearing. So I'm just skimming it. And I may not be fully understanding it, but the gist of the letter is complaining there are other aspects of state regulations that are at variance, let's say, with current city municipal code. And one of the objections this resident brings up is that the municipal code currently would restrict ADU development near ridge lines and would restrict development near projected trees. And the state law that we're required to harmonize with ignores that and would essentially remove that and allow building near ridge lines, which our laws prohibit. So is that something you're able to comment on, or does that require additional study?
Thank you, Councilmember Newman. To be honest, actually, we haven't seen that letter yet. However, there's nothing in this ADU ordinance that would prevent us from being able to enforce our oak tree protections and our hillside ordinance as it stands.
Good answer. Thank you. That's all. Thank you.
Mr. Engler.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you again for the presentation. It's always good to get a clearer picture of how things are going. I think I understand the 850, 1,000, or half the size of the building now. How does it relate though to the number of bedrooms? Can it be 1,000 feet with one bedroom, or does the bedroom question kick in when you go to the larger size?
Thank you for that question, Councilmember Engler. So there's two distinctions, right? So we have attached ADUs, which we were just talking about with the differentiation between the 850 square foot and then the 50%. And then there's also detached accessory dwelling units. So for the attached dwelling units, sorry, I just lost my train of thought. Well, can you repeat your question one more time? I'm so sorry.
That was so long ago.
Oh, the
Let's
bedroom,
see.
the bedroom count. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, what's the relevance, I think, of because there's quite a bit of discussion in the ordinance about one bedroom, two bedroom size and that sort of thing.
I'm so sorry.
How does that figure
so
in?
it's with 850 square feet or more, it's one bedroom or more. And then with the detached, it is 850 square feet is one bedroom or more. And then with the 1,000 square feet for the detached ADU, it's two bedrooms or more. And yeah, that was the only clarification.
Okay. And then I think, talk to me a little bit more about the RENA effect of what we're doing here. I think you mentioned, or at least I heard somewhere, that we've had 105 applications for ADUs this last year. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. We've received about 110 ADU applications this year.
More or less, yeah. How do we shoehorn that into our RENA? What is the effect of that number of units coming on board when we're reporting the state on our RENA responsibilities?
Councilmember Engler, I'll jump in and answer that question. The ADU permits are counted when building permits are issued for RENA. That's the benchmark at which they're counted. So this year, we've taken approximately 115 ADU applications, but so far to date, we've issued 44 building permits for ADUs. So it means that these will count towards our market rate units for RENA.
So it only counts toward market rate. We don't assign low income or very low income or any other credit we might have for that.
No, they are not.
Okay. We have the two ways of being able to apply to do an ADU. One is the streamlined state method, and then we go to the city method. We're adding some incentives so that people go to the city side of things, so we can ask them to perform in terms of our standards. If they go to the streamlined state method, do we lose all ability to ask for those things such as the opaque glass and no external stairways and all that? In other words, can we still ask for those things, or is it pretty much a one way or the other?
Yeah, I'll answer that. I mean, it's essentially one way or the other. I mean, we could certainly ask, but we can't require those standards for those types of units.
Thank you.
Mr. McNamee.
Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate the report. Thank you. As I've often commented, the greatest challenge we have here on the city council level is navigating what's thrown at us from Sacramento to tell us how to run our city. I think for 60 years we've done a good job, but Sacramento feels that they know best. I have a question and clarification on setbacks. 4 feet on left, right side, back. However, the front, how far back is that to be from the sidewalk? Is that an ADU required?
Thank you for that question, Councilmember McNamee. As I was describing the two processes for ADU applications, there's the city ADU application process and there's the state streamline process. For the city's ADU process, that has not changed. We still require the front setback to be the same as the primary dwelling. As for the state streamline process, as was mentioned before, there is a preclusion that we cannot limit an 800 square foot ADU. However, with the amount of applications that we do get, and as we just mentioned, 110, that hasn't come up yet because there are so many design options. There are, the converted garage, the JADU, the detached ADU. Because there's so many configuration combinations that are possible, we haven't come across a point where an 800 square foot ADU in the front yard is the only way to develop an ADU.
To clarify, if they move down the state standard, theoretically, and which means probably it's going to happen, someone could put an ADU right smack on the sidewalk, and that's where it's going to be if they follow the state standards. Is that a correct understanding? Even though, yes, I agree with you, we haven't had any so far, but by law, they could come in and say, I'm doing the state standard. I want to put this right smack up onto the sidewalk. That's where the ADU is going to be built. Is that correct?
There are other provisions that could come into place, such as the Public Works Department has utility easements and many of the front setbacks. So the likelihood of whether or not they could actually go to the front of the property line would be something that is unforeseen. So we would have to look into that, but that is another factor.
Second question. We have a 16-foot or 18-foot roof. And again, if they move it up towards the front, maybe it's not smack onto the sidewalk, but they move it back 8 feet because of easements or whatever the case may be. Again, they would be able to have a 18-foot roof. Is that correct in that situation?
Yes, with state ADU law, the detached ADU height is 16 feet, and they can go up to 18 feet with a pitched roof. There is an allowance if cities would like to go up higher than that height restriction, and we have chosen not to.
And then the last is design element. Again, one design element needs to be part of the ADU. Paint, tiles, shingles, whatever. What happens 6 months, a year, 2 years, where they want to change the paint, the exterior, and so forth? Do we have exterior police running around checking to make certain they're still in compliance? Or we rely on the neighbors to say, oh, that color doesn't work, it's not part of the ADU that was put in there to be with the primary?
It's going to be the same as an existing single-family home, right? If you have an HOA that limits what colors your house can be painted, then you have those limitations.
Now, that's when we don't have HOAs or POAs. Answer that part.
It becomes a code issue.
It becomes a what?
A code compliance issue.
Code compliance issue, so the neighbors have to complain and they
well,
have to
when
know
you
that
when
is
you
it.
end up with situations where it's weeds in the yard, if you end up with a situation where someone puts a giant sign across the front,
Right.
there's a variety of issues.
I'm just pointing out that this is kind of a useless requirement because it can be changed and no one's going to know about it to complain and have come in with code compliance. And I can see from a design standpoint, and being married to a designer, I've seen how even being a little bit different with the ADU, with the designs you presented, you could probably do some pretty cool accent colors and make it look completely different, but still make it pop, as the term goes. So I don't know if that's really an element that's necessary in these ADUs, kind of constraining the design possibilities. I am just, again, questioning the state coming in and saying if you move down those standards, you can put it close to the street, if not right on the sidewalk. And that frightens me. And yet we haven't had any come forward. Yes, we got perhaps easement issues, but it's going to happen. And we have no choice in the matter. We have to move down that avenue. And again, I thank you very much for the wonderful presentation, and thank you for helping navigate and maintain the look and feel we love of this city. Mayor?
Thank you. I beg your pardon, Mr. Newman?
Thank you, Mayor. I neglected to ask something else I wanted to bring up about the objective design standards. We had discussed this in a staff meeting, and this came up in planning as well. Staff is responsive to the concerns of our residents, and one of those concerns that has been brought up with ADUs is privacy, where neighbors have expressed concerns about having windows at the same level of structures that may be closer than the primary residence was, or whatever. So to address this privacy concern, staff came up with a requirement I think it's in the objective design standards, to have, quote, privacy glass. And because that is a pretty broad term, there's a specific definition of what that privacy glass must do. And I don't have a problem with that definition. However, I want to raise a concern and ask a question about the wording, the way it's worded, because currently the way it reads is privacy glass, which requires a minimum of 50% transparency. And I think, in my opinion, that gets it exactly backward, because if we're saying minimum of 50%, then it could be greater than, it means 50% at least. So we could go all the way up to 100% transparency, and that's not privacy glass. That's glass that lets all the light through. So I would like to ask if staff would be amenable to changing that language, either to say a minimum of 50% opacity, or I did some research on this, and the term of art in the window tinting business is an acronym of VLT, which is visible light transmission. And the way VLT works is, for example, a 20% VLT window film is one in which 80% of the light that comes in is blocked. So it's another way of saying opacity. But whichever staff is more comfortable with, I'd like to ask first, conceptually, is staff amenable to changing this to reflect what we're actually trying to convey here? And two, I'll leave the wording up to you, but either opacity or VLT Would that be a better specification for what we're trying to achieve here?
Councilmember Newman, thank you so much for bringing that up, and you are 100% correct. Originally, I did have the word opacity in and decided to change it to transparency, and with that, it changed the meaning of it. So you're correct, and staff would definitely agree with changing the word to opacity.
Very good. If it's any consolation, in my field, photography, we use neutral density filters, and the terminology is even more confusing, where something that's the equivalent of 50% VLT would be called an ND2, which is because it's one f-stop or two, so it's blocking by everything is halves and doubles. So that's even less clear to me. So I appreciate opacity because it's nice and simple. Thank you.
That's interesting. Change from transparency to opacity with VLTs. I'm learning a lot tonight. Mr. McNamee.
Thank you, Mayor. Just to follow up on the question of the external staircase versus internal, city is requiring an internal staircase. However, if they go down again, the state standard, do I understand it correctly? They can put an external staircase, is that correct?
No, that's not correct. So with the state ADU process, second floor ADUs and JADUs are not something that's allowed. That's allowed with the city standard. And so if they have a second story ADU or JADU, they will be following the city's ADU ordinance, which will be following our development standards and our objective design standards, which include an interior staircase.
Wait a minute. If they're down the city standard, are they allowed to do an external staircase?
No.
If they do a state standard, can they have an external staircase?
A staircase wouldn't be part of the proposal with the
Can't do it.
with the state streamline
Okay.
process.
Thank you. Just clarifying. Thank you. Mayor?
Okay. Any other questions? Doesn't look like it. Well, I'll just say, as always, we seem to be trying to strike a balance here between what the state wants and what we want. And I'm assuming the 850 square feet or the 50% of the primary dwelling complies with state law, correct?
Yes.
And also, there's provisions in here that still give us a little bit of local control.
Yes, that's the
Namely, the objective standards that we can apply, and any other highlights on local control?
Was the question, do I have any other highlights for local control?
That gives us local control over these dwellings.
Yeah, there were quite a bit of the development standards that were included with the ordinance and the objective design standards. There are numerous ones, different ones that talk about pathways, making sure that there's a safe access way for residents of ADUs to enter into their ADU. That was one of the concerns. There are different things with design standards, so I'm not sure what your specific question is, if there's anything that I can better assist you with.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm looking for. I mean, we have to comply with state regulations, but at the same time, we have our standards that need to be applied as well. So, like I said, I think we struck a balance here. All right. Yes, Mr. Engler.
Yeah, just a question. As we were discussing, I was thinking of there's companies out there who will have sort of pre-built ADUs that can be installed more than really built. In terms of building codes, is there a separate building code for ADUs as opposed to regular structures, or is it the same building code that we have adopted in the past? Does that apply to both types?
Thank you for the question. The same building code would apply to both. Typically, the prefabricated ADUs are already constructed to comply with California code.
Mr. McNamee?
Thank you, Mayor. A question probably for our legal eagle expert, Tracy Noonan. We have the state telling the city what we can do and not do, imposing its will upon us. Where we have HOAs and POAs and other relationships between the purchase of a house into that community. They have CC&Rs that they sign to and agree to. Whereas the state has come in and said, nope, sorry, those are all null and void. It's an agreement between two parties that both go in and agree to. And yet the state's saying, nope, sorry, that's not going to be an agreement that we're going to let you have. Is there anything on the federal level that says, nope, you can't do that, state, because this is an agreement between two parties and you cannot usurp someone's rights under whatever? Do you know of anything along those lines that the feds are protecting the homeowner and the CCRs of the HOA and POA?
You know, I'm not aware of it, but I admit I haven't really researched it, and that's because, you know, just with any, you know, historically when a city processes a project, whether it's a house or whatever, that is going to be in an existing HOA, when we process it, we make it very clear to the applicant that the CC&Rs are a private contract between the homeowner and the HOA. So even if we approve your project, you still need to make sure that it's consistent and complies with your HOA restrictions. We can't override those, in other words. So that would be the same case here. I mean, I know historically, you and I had a conversation yesterday about the fact that what the state has done with the ADUs is really no different than they did, you know, I think it was like less than 10 years ago on the Solar Rights Act, where they passed laws limiting enforcement of other types of restrictions on that. And I remember as far as like 20 years ago, remember satellite dishes, that was the big thing. And in the beginning, a lot of HOAs prohibited those, and it was eventually overruled on those grounds too. So I know that states do that, but I personally have never done a deep dive in it to see if there's any, whether there's any federal law out there or federal case out there that says you can't do it.
The reason why is I'm real big on agreements between two parties, and whether it be HOAs, POAs with a owner of the property, and not having the state coming in and saying, nope, that's not a valid agreement. We're going to make that null and void because we're the state and you're not. And to me, that's tyranny. Whereas I hear what you're saying is that, well, we've done this with satellite dishes and solar panels, but they may have violated some sort of federal law from rights of individuals at a federal level that would come into play here. And yes, our city has no standing to take that on, but it would be one that the HOA, go ahead.
Yeah, I was thinking out loud, when RDA was dissolved, one of the arguments, you know, many cities sued the state over dissolution of RDAs, and one of the arguments was impairment of contract. Because we have a lot of contracts associated with development projects, the redevelopment agencies did. And I believe the city's lost on that ground in state court.
Right. But again, maybe this is a different animal, and I would like a deep dive into that just to see, are they violating the law, and to see if that is an issue. And it would be one where the HOA property owners would say, nope, we don't want this in our community. It violates our CC&R. And you know what? The Constitution of the United States or some federal statute says, no, you can't do that. I would like to know if that's truly the case, because I'm not happy the state's coming in telling us how to run our city. Mayor?
Thank you. All right, very good. If there is no more discussion, I'm going to close the public hearing and ask for discussion and/or a motion. Mr. Taylor?
Mr. Mayor, excuse me.
What we do? John? I'm sorry. Come on down. Actually, we have two speakers. Yeah.
All right. Great discussion. Good job all around. All right, so I'm going to kind of expand on what I talked about earlier regarding the Constitution. And with regard to additional dwelling units, where the state law is pushing down, well, Assembly Bill 670, it says, and I'm going to kind of summarize and read the parts that apply to this. It says, any covenant, restriction, or condition contained in any deed, contract, security instrument that either prohibits or unreasonably restricts the construction or use of an accessory dwelling unit on a lot zoned for single-family residential use is void and unenforceable. So that's the superseding of the contracts that I have with my neighbors, that you have with your neighbors. And by the way, you don't have to be in an HOA. I'm going to estimate that probably about 95% of the homes in Thousand Oaks probably have CC&Rs, and some of those also are HOAs. And the HOAs help enforce the CC&Rs, but they're all with their CC&Rs, with their covenants, conditions, and restrictions. Those are contracts between all our neighbors. So the state law is saying those contracts are void with regard to ADUs, additional dwelling units. So that's where the problem comes. Because in the Constitution, this is important. This is the U.S. Constitution. It says in Article 1, Section 10, it says about 10 different things. It covers titles of nobility and coining of money. But one of the things it says is, no state shall pass any law which impairs the obligation of contracts. And that's exactly what this is doing. So, we're basically, I know there's a lot that happens between the state, the Assembly, and the Senate, in each city and county, and how cities are incorporated. But if we, as citizens of this city, when the state tells us to do something that is unlawful and unconstitutional, we need to stand up and say, hey, we can't do this. If you're in the military and you follow an unlawful order, you're going up before a court-martial in most cases. So we need to really, really take this seriously, because this is just one little law. This is one little issue, and there are more. Now we've got lot splitting, which also in many cases violate CC&Rs, the covenants, because you're not, in most that I've seen, they say you can't modify the property lines. And now we've got lot merging coming. SB 35. So we got SB 9, SB 35, and now they're talking about, okay, now let's take these lots and just combine them into one and, tear down 3 houses and build an apartment building. So let's really look at this stuff. Let's consider it, because once the door has a foot in it, once they get their foot in the door, they come back every year or two and they update it. They add more stuff, and they do more intrusive stuff. And that, again, when it violates the CC&Rs, those are covenants. That's serious stuff. So now there is a solution that we could put into our paperwork here in Thousand Oaks. So please listen. This is something we could do here in the planning department, where we can do the law the way they say it in the meantime, but we should stand up against it in the long run. But we could just write on all the applications, all the municipal codes that apply to ADUs or anything else, and just write on those that this statement: this does not exempt you from other existing deeds, CCRs, HOA rules, or other agreements or contracts. And just put a little signature block there, so the homeowner knows it doesn't exempt them from that. All right, that's it. God bless.
Thank you, John. Nan Chu.
Hello, Mayor Adam, council members, city manager, and staff. Thank you for the opportunity to voice my comments on the ADU. And thank you very much for putting that presentation. I have a full view of what is involved. However, I have lived in, my name is Nan Chu. I have lived in Newberry Park for the last 19 years. My address is 3338 Prairie Court, right at the corner of Wendy and Lynn. In the past couple of years, I have seen 2 ADUs being built in my neighborhood. I live in 2 cul-de-sacs. It's really peaceful, and I plan to live there for my entire retirement life to death. So I don't really plan to move to any places, and I really appreciate the open space and the greens and the paths and everything around my house. The two ADUs I witnessed to be built, I had no objection. I knew the purposes, and I'm all behind that. But my close neighbor east to me, they started to build a shed, a humongous shed that really blocked my view. I talked to the city, and they said there was no code to protect the view. So I stay put. And then I heard that there were 2 more ADU applications that are pending. Okay, every family has their needs. Every family has the control of their property. And I'm so pleased to hear all the comments from the council members really dig into the proposal. I think you did a lot of good work, but there's still a lot of holes in this. And I want to bring up the ones that I have written down, which are not really covered in the discussions here. And I'm hoping to have more opportunities for hearings for the public, particularly the ones that have experienced ADU being built in the neighborhood and how that affects my life, maybe other people who are silent. Okay, I like to read the 5 requirements I put down. I might have more, depending on the time. And I'm going to just bring that up, and then hopefully these things will be considered. First one, only 1-story ADUs, less than 10 feet high. This is my wish. From the top of the roof that's in existence. And particularly in the area where the adjacent housings are all 1-story. If you have a 2-story housing, that's a different situation. But I would like to maintain at least the neighborhood. If they are all 1-story, there shouldn't be a 2-story ADU being built right in the middle of all these cul-de-sacs. Number 2, this is quite unconventional, I believe. I would require minimum yard space of all dwellings on a single property. Take an example. If I have a 10,000 square feet property, I like to at least keep 4,000 empty space. Okay, so all the discussions about the minimum space or the maximum space you can build on ADU should also consider the environment. If I live in a place where I have a lot of space, I shouldn't sacrifice all that space simply because of ADU. Maximum number of people living on a single property. Okay, all these ADUs are going to increase the density of the residents in the neighborhood. There is no maximum. If I understand the purpose behind ADU, it's for elderlies, for in-laws, or for people in transition, whoever they are, but it shouldn't increase the density of an area too much. I would suggest to limit that to 6, maybe 7, okay, in one property. I don't want to see a bunch of people occupying the ADU, even if you have 1 bedroom, and it's actually, the code says 1 bedroom or more. I would like to put a maximum number on that. 1 bedroom is supposed to be occupied by perhaps up to 4. Hopefully these places are accommodating 1 or 2. Okay, and your primary house would have about, the standard family size 4, and you add your in-laws, or you add your children, one or the other, not everybody.
Ms. Chu, give us your final 2.
Yeah.
Quickly, please.
Yeah, I know. I didn't know how much time I have.
Because you're out of time.
Yeah, thank you for granting me that. So the 4th one, all adjacent neighbors should be notified and consulted to assure the quality of their life can be maintained. And the last one, building obstructions and noise should be mitigated by vegetation to maintain green and the incumbent scenes prior to addition. Mitigation can include planting of tall trees, brushes, and flowers along the neighbor's border.
All right,
So
thank you,
thank you
ma'am.
very much.
Thank you for coming down. Appreciate that very much. All righty. Staff, any comments to our speakers?
Just in relation to the speakers, we truly appreciate the comments and all of the suggestions as it relates to the ordinance. We would love to incorporate all of these ideas. However, they run contrary to what the state law requires in this particular area. We would definitely like to incorporate some of those things, and they're consistent with basic typical planning law ordinarily, with the exception of the state precludes us from doing those things. This is not a local determination. If it was, we would include that if we could, but in this instance, we simply cannot.
All right, I see. Mr. McNamee, go ahead.
I really think these two comments outline the following need. City of Thousand Oaks has been in the forefront unwillingly, but leading up the charge for legal precedent here in California with lawsuits that have been brought towards us, and we have pushed back and working its way up to the U.S. Supreme Court in some cases. We have Nan Chu, who I would encourage to consider being on the Planning Commission and eventually maybe council member at some point down the road. You're very good, like your ideas and your creative thinking. It's very, very encompassing and a breath of fresh air. She brings up a very good point, and that, a lot of things aren't being considered here by the state level, and these ADUs being pushed down on us. And yet we also have John, who kind of answered my question, because I don't know the Constitution as well as others, but perhaps there's a constitutional violation that California has been enjoying up to this point because no one's really challenged it. My ask of city attorney and city manager is to look at any violations on the federal level here on the state imposing ADUs and the way in which they're making contracts null and void, agreements between two parties saying, nope, that doesn't apply. And I would like to see staff put some energy into taking a look at this and see what comes up. Because I think, Nan, thank you for those ideas. John, thank you for the idea. And I think this deserves further exploration because, Mr. Parker, as you say, we're just trying to comply with the state. And I'm tired of trying to comply with the state. We do a good job here in Thousand Oaks. Mr. Powers?
If that's the will of the council to provide that direction, we would certainly need to have a deeper dive conversation about it to understand what you're referencing there in terms. We always maintain a legal review of key cases that are affecting governments. I think City Attorney Noonan's comment was just that, in this case, there is no legal basis that we're aware of that's attached to that.
I agree with you that we haven't really made a look at it. As Ms. Noonan, you've commented that haven't really done a deep dive into it. I think it's worthwhile doing, and again, Thousand Oaks is going to lead the way again for California. We may actually find something that may reverse all this down the road, but I think it's worth a deep dive, and we can have that conversation and see if we want to bring it up later on.
We would need that direction from the council, for sure.
Definitely. Nan, John, excellent comments. Thank you.
Well, that's why I brought up the issue of local control. I think staff built in as much local control as they possibly could within the parameters that the state gives us. But I do appreciate coming down, Ms. Chu, and sharing your insights, especially considering you have ADUs that have been built around you, so you can speak firsthand of some of the implications. Thank you. And John, thank you as well. All right. No more comments?
One quick question for staff on one of Ms. Chu's
Mr. Winkler.
recommendations. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. What regulations do we have on mitigating construction noise and noxious things? And can we require any plantings to reduce the visual impact?
So I can take part of that question. So, the city does have rules on time and noise levels, and so those can be enforced whether it's an ADU or any other type of construction. with regard to planting foliage or whatnot associated with ADUs. That's something that we could look into, but as the ordinance sits today, that's not a objective design standard that we have.
So any construction has to comply with our noise ordinance. It doesn't matter whether it's an ADU, mixed-use development, a single house that's being built, has to comply with our noise ordinance. During construction, there's other types of, requirements. You've got your water runoff, all of the water quality, all of those things would apply regardless of it being an ADU or anything. So those types of like environmental issues, those would be dealt with regardless of the fact that it's an ADU.
And as it relates to the foliage question, the key there distinction is objective, right? Objective design standards have to be, they are a lot crisper than what our previous standards were, which were very subjective, and landscaping inherently turns into that. That said, subsequent to Planning Commission's consideration of this item and tonight, the governor has signed 3 new ADU bills. So we will be back before you again in early next year with another item associated with ADUs. If we can find anything associated with that's able to be incorporated, we'll certainly talk about it at that time.
Yeah, thank you.
All righty, then I am going to close the public hearing and look for a discussion motion. Mr. Taylor?
Okay, first, for Nancy, I just have to say, a lot of your thoughts you were so thoughtful in some of those ideas. I really appreciate that. John, I share, we have the same outlook on the importance and value of the Constitution. I appreciate you coming and speaking and the conversations we've had in the past. And where I agree with Kevin, that the challenge that we have on the local level and navigating this through state requirements is not easy. We try to find the balance, and 2, at least for me personally, I'm trying to gauge risk and return. And we're city council members. We're not on the assembly. We're not involved in the actual policy making from the state. So at least how I look at it, the idea of suing the state, going out of compliance, where I'm very uncomfortable with that is I don't want to put the taxpayer dollars at risk when I don't know, when the odds for us winning look low. There's another city that's going against this, and we have some precedent to follow. That's a different story. But I'm okay seeing or checking if there's any other cities that have done it. But that's kind of where I stand on going against it. It's not saying I like it. I think we're trying in a lot of cases to make the best of some challenging situations. As far as the ADUs go, I like the streamlined process and having some design ability to it, especially seeing that this is maybe now the most desirable asset in our neighborhood as far as permits go. There's a lot of people pulling permits to build. For the I'm totally comfortable moving 10A. What I would like to add to it, though, is I want to stick to the 850 square foot that staff recommended. And then I'd also include changing, what was the original word you wanted to change? Something to opacity? And changing transparency to opacity.
So for clarification, your motion is to approve the municipal code amendment with staff's original verbiage on the square footage of the building and replacing the word transparent with, or transparency with opacity.
Correct.
Okay, you got it? Okay.
All right. Mr. Newman?
Yeah, I concur with most, if not all, of Councilmember Taylor's comments. And I, too, am appreciative of both of you for coming in and giving thoughtful testimony on this matter. ADUs are a really important part of our current housing story. We don't know exactly where we'll land this year, but we do know that in the past 3 years running, that ADUs for all 3 years have accounted for more than 80% of all the building permits issued. So this is a very important part of our housing story. And to the extent that we can retain local control, I'm very appreciative of staff's efforts to have that and to try to begin to address some of the concerns that Ms. Chu and many other residents are raising with us. We want to be responsive to that. We want to do a good job on adding this kind of housing. We also want to have more options when families have a parent or children, or maybe want to have some extra rental income. This is a viable option in a situation where housing of any kind is out of reach for too many people. We need to be more creative about what we can do, and this ADUs are one of a variety of things we can and should be doing. But we would like to retain local control to the extent that we can. At the same time, I'm also in agreement with my colleague, Mr. Taylor, about the need to proceed with caution when it comes to matters of constitutional law. We all of us, both staff and we on the council, all take an oath of office, and that oath of office requires us to uphold both the federal and state constitutions, both of which grant those levels of government the authority to define laws, to pass laws, to say what contracts can and cannot do. That's way above our pay grade here. I'm not an expert in that. I'm happy to see if there's someone else who has opinions on that, but I'm not a lawyer, let alone empowered as a city official to weigh in on what the federal or state government can and cannot do, other than saying, reminding all of us here that we're bound by our oaths of office. So it's an interesting question. I'm not sure we'll turn up anything, but I am glad to see that we are responsive to, we are in alignment with, we are in compliance with now this moving target of the state regulatory environment around ADUs. And at the same time, we're doing something to retain local control. So thank you for that. Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. Newman. Mr. Engler?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And to echo my colleagues' praise of our speakers today, we don't always get very reasoned responses from our audience. And thank you so much for bringing such great ideas to us. With that said, I think that the situation that we are dealing with here is some state directives that I think are in conflict a little bit with each other. And I appreciate that the Planning Commission sent us a recommendation for changing one of our standards to the 1,000 feet from 850. I appreciate that, but right now, because of the conflicts that are inherent in what we're trying to deal with here, I would stay with more what the state is asking us to do, because the state is going to have to unwind some of the issues. And as our city manager pointed out, we have 3 more laws that were signed this year that will also come into play as we go forward with this particular type of housing. This particular type of housing is important because it is part of our general plan to have it in place. It does serve a need, as Ms. Chow talked about, having to do with people who would like to stay in place on their property. I think it does serve a good purpose for that. The bottom line, though, is that we do need to be part of what the state is bringing forward. I agree with my colleagues that to not do so puts us at risk of losing our certification of our housing element, that then brings into, puts us at risk of builders' remedies, that a builder can come in and say we don't have an approved housing element, and therefore they can make use of other state laws that really restrict our ability to address what we would like to see in our city. I appreciate my colleague to my left here, Mr. McNamee, and our speaker talking about the perhaps constitutional issues. But as my colleague said, we're not in a position today or perhaps ever to be able to really define that if there's no case law that supports it. I would be supportive, I think, of the proposal to go to what the staff recommended, 850 feet limit, and as written by the staff.
Thank you. Mr. McNamee?
Thank you, Mayor. We've been very blessed in the city for the last 60 years with very talented city staff that has brought forth solutions to challenges that we face. And what we've had presented today is no different. And it's because of the talented city staff that we have the tremendous city we live in, I refer to as the gem of California. We want to maintain the look and feel of this city and not have Sacramento dictate how we do it. At this point in time, though, we have to comply with what Sacramento throws our way, and we can dance around it as best we can to dress it up, and as they say, put lipstick on a pig, it's still a pig. However, I'm not in any way, shape, or form saying that we need to make a decision regarding the unknown. A farmer was once walking across his farmland and sees a bushel basket upside down. He walked over to it, wondered what was in it, flipped it over to see what was in it. In this case, my ask is our legal counsel do a deep dive into other cities, federal law, constitution, whatever the case may be, to see where we stand. And then we can make a decision instead of saying, oh, we don't want to get into this, when we haven't even turned the bushel basket over to see what's there. We make some choices at that point. And I think it would be best to protect the citizens of our community, Thousand Oaks, to do that legal research, come back, make a decision, whatever it may be, but at least we know what's under that basket to move forward. I'm supportive of what your staff has done. I think you've done a good job trying to do the best under these circumstances. I think Ms. Chu and John have done a good job presenting some ideas here. I don't claim to be a legal expert, nor do I play one on TV. That's why we have Ms. Noonan and her talented staff of legal to look into this. And I think we'd be remiss if we don't look into this to see is state violating any contract laws, imposing their will upon the people, requiring ADUs when the community may not want it. So I'm going to be in favor of this because staff, you did a great job with it. It's the best we can do with what we've been handed, and look forward to the vote. Mayor, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McNamee. Yeah, I think local control was always best. I've always said that we know best on what, where, and how to build here in our own city. Good example of that in our general plan update, we have an approved housing element, which shields us from state intervention. I'm happy to say a lot of cities don't have that, and they're facing all kinds of consequences. But I will also say that running afoul of state law can be very costly to the taxpayer. As justifiable as it may seem, we have to be practical about it as well. Getting the state involved and becoming on the negative side can be very counterproductive in the scrutiny that it invites on a city. So, but with that, I will support the motion. I appreciate staff. Want to keep this as simple as possible for our residents, and I think you've done that, and I think you've established some local control at the same time, striking that balance that we always look for. And if there's no other questions or discussion, let's bring it to a vote.
And that motion passes 5-0, and I have an ordinance title to read. It's an ordinance amending the Thousand Oaks Municipal Code relating to regulation of accessory dwelling units by removing section 9-4.2521, amending Article 25, Sections 9-4.2509.5, 9-4.2501A3, 9-4.2509A, Article 22, Section 9-4.2202A, Article 21, Section 9-4.2104, Article 24, Section 9-4.2402, Article 2, Section 9-4.202, and adding Article 45, Sections 9-4.501 through 9-4.4513, MCA-2023-7005.
Thank you, Ms. McGuire. Councilman Engler, you went to the Mobility 21 Annual Summit.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Mobility 21 is a group that was founded about 25 years ago to help with transportation in the Southern California region, which is everything basically south of Ventura County. I was a beneficiary and sort of a victim of our transportation system, as it took me 3 hours to get to Anaheim when I tried to drive down there the other day. So it's a group that is trying its best to make our transportation system work better for us. Just a couple of highlights I wanted to share. And one of the things that we've been beneficiaries of in the last couple of years with the infrastructure bill, the bipartisan infrastructure bill that is giving money directly to local agencies for infrastructure. In 24-25, it's $21 billion coming out of the feds that we are trying to use in our region as much as possible to help with some of the transportation issues. One of these side seminars I went to had to do with the ports. And the ports of LA Long Beach they're the largest ports in the country. So much of the Asian imports that come through to the rest of the country flow through those ports, and their ability to move that freight is crucial to the entire economy. I don't think we have to go too far back to remember the 50 ships that were backed up off the port and how that affected our economy back in the days of COVID. But they're very important. But they're also a very high polluter, and they're working very hard to use some electric shuttles around the port and using the train systems as opposed to the truck systems to move that freight out of the area. It's also in 2028, we're going to have the Olympics in town, and so the infrastructure is supposed to support a system that is going to be a carless Olympics. That's the goal, to be a carless Olympics. I'm not, I'll be optimistic. We can do this, but it's going to be a very difficult task to put forward. The port is, we can't stop that freight moving either, and that's another layer that we have to work with. All in all, I think it was a very good seminar to attend. We were able to put our viewpoints forward, and hopefully next time I attend, it won't take me 3 hours to drive down.
Yes, I hope so too. Thank you for representing us, Mr. Engler. Appreciate that very much. Mr. Powers, what do we have coming up?
Thank you. We've got a meeting in 2 weeks.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Yep. We do need a vote.
Okay.
And we'll receive, I need a motion to receive and file that report.
So moved to receive and file.
And also find that CEQA does not apply.
Yes, it does. CEQA did not apply to my attendance.
Thank you.
And let us vote.
And that motion carries 5-0.
Now, Mr. Powers, tell us what
Thanks, Mayor
is
Adam.
coming.
2 weeks from tonight, 22nd, we'll be here that evening. We have a borderline day of remembrance we do on an annual basis. That'll be the last meeting before the November 7th date that we always memorialize. We do have a public hearing that night on some cultural affairs, Ticketmaster-related user fees. We have a department report that evening related to our community grants updates. The council will remember that earlier in the year we told you we'd be back with some recommendations related to our community grants and perhaps enhancing and augmenting aspects of that. So that'll be before you on the 22nd of October.
All right, thank you, Mr. Powers. Thank you for everyone for participating this evening, and we will see you all in 2 weeks.